Hi, it's Jody Medell, Doctor of Physical Therapy and Transformational Coach, welcoming you back to our video series on trauma and healing. Today, we're going to take the deep dive into understanding what brain dysregulation is. And the reason why we're going to talk about brain dysregulation is because I just finished Anna Runkle's new book called Re-Regulated. She has done amazing work to bring complex PTSD to the forefront in terms of education and knowledge and ways that we can best heal complex PTSD. And this book is super important as a self-help book to let you know if you happen to have the characteristics or the experience of having complex PTSD, that you can take certain means to heal yourself. You don't have to rely on others to intervene. It's really about you learning the tools, implementing them, and making a change in the trajectory or the outcome of your life. And it allows you then to come home to you and live from your heart space. So, brain dysregulation is basically the hallmark that really defines complex PTSD and separates it out from other types of trauma. So, as we talked about before, complex PTSD is due to repeated trauma over your childhood. So that trauma could be neglect, abuse, abandonment, exposure to a really nasty environment. And it's not that it happened just once, it's kind of how you were raised. And so the brain, doing the best job it can as you were growing up, instead of being nurtured and aligned and given all the goodness that it needs to develop in a way that is regulated, it does the best job it can given the stressful environment that it was under to create an outcome. And unfortunately, that ends up in a dysregulated brain. The good news to this, though, is that our brain is plastic. It's malleable. And the more we understand that our brain is dysregulated, and the more that we can tap into when it's dysregulated, we can make the choice right here, right now, to change the outcome, to change the trajectory. So we no longer have to just accept that, oh, this is my brain, this is what it does. I have these external stressors, they're triggering me, and this is what I do. That is wrong. You can change that. And so if you refer to Anna's book, Re-Regulated, it gives you tips and healing modalities to use to get you from reacting and following that response or reaction that doesn't work. And it gives you clues, tips, healing advice on how to then respond in a way that re-regulates your brain. So for me, that was really powerful when I realized that it was my brain that was dysregulated, that was causing my emotional outbursts, my inability to connect with people, my always being in a state of fight or flight, even if it's at a low level, but having that as my fallback. And when I realized that was simply my brain doing the best job it could as it was developing when I was a child, creating that outcome, I now as an adult, knowing that was the situation, I can go in now and because of the malleability and plasticity of my brain, change the outcome. So it kind of goes back to what we talked about in a few videos ago, is again, changing that trajectory of your life. You don't have to default into a pattern that was already hardwired. You can cut that, stay in present time, and in this present time, change it and move forward. So that's pretty exciting for those of us who have dealt with the effects of trauma. And again, and Anna has supported this, we can't change trauma. Trauma happened in the past. And even if we did change it, the effects of it have already manifested as brain dysregulation. And so even if the trauma were changed, we're still going to have the same effect. So all we can do, which is wonderful because it's on us to do it. We're in charge. We have that power. We can empower ourselves to be present here and now and change the brain dysregulation, therefore changing the outcome, changing the narrative. So what exactly is brain dysregulation? Well, we're going to take the little deep dive in understanding a little bit of the anatomy, physiology of our brain. And the hope is that if we understand what's dysregulated in our brain, it gives us a better means to wrap our arms around how we can change and adapt and mold our brain into something that is re-regulated. So with dysregulation, I'm going to talk about two main components of the brain. This is really simple, right? So I'm not going to go into all aspects of the brain because I want it to make sense and I want it to be functional for you, with the overall outcome being that it just gives you a better grasp of what's dysregulated so that you can re-regulate it, okay? So the first part of the brain that I want to talk about is the limbic system. And the limbic system is the part of our brain that is responsible for our instinctual response to the environment, our instinctual response to the stressors of our environment. So it's basically where we get our fight or flight response from. From there, we have the hippocampus, and the hippocampus is the part of our brain that takes our short-term memories and puts them into long-term memories. It's also able to extract our memories and basically remember them and act on them. And then the other part of our brain that fits into this limbic system is the HPA axis. And that is our part of the brain that releases cortisol. And cortisol is a stress response hormone, okay? So the HPA axis is made up of 3 different organs. We don't need to know the details of that right now, but we do know that it's responsible for the excretion of cortisol. All right, there's more parts to the limbic system, but in terms of our purposes for understanding dysregulation, these 3 pieces are what's most important for us. The other part of our brain that is important is the prefrontal cortex. I will get these words out today. And that part of our brain is our higher functioning brain. It's there for cognition. It's our ability to create plans and enact them. It's our ability to take our emotions and manage them. All right, so you can see why all these parts of the brain are really important for regulating our function. So what happens is that when we're under stress from long-term childhood abuse, trauma, neglect, the amygdala, part of the limbic system, gets caught up in its fight or flight response. So it becomes overactivated. It becomes then the means of how we interact with our environment. So any stressors in the environment haunt us with this amygdala coming on board loud and strong. And then the hippocampus, which is responsible for converting these memories, gets disrupted. And so we end up having a short circuit in our transition of short-term memories to long-term memories. And sometimes then even the memories that are housed as our long-term memories, then they keep coming back to haunt us. And that's why we can have these repeated episodes of trauma coming back to us and haunting us in present time. And then with the HPA axis and the oversecretion of cortisol, that just makes us super fatigued, tired. It's an overreaction then to the stressors. So you have the amygdala coming on, increasing our fight or flight response. We have the hippocampus, which has a difficult time taking our memories, storing our memories, and then haunting us with old memories of the trauma. And then we have the HPA axis with the cortisol just responding to the stress, But that stress hormone then is supposed to be on, then done, but we stay in it and it can't keep it going. So we end up with a chronic fatigue, possibly. We just end up getting super tired and we can't manage this high load of an emotional response from the environment. And then our prefrontal cortex isn't able then to offset the effects of our fight or flight mode, of our amygdala kicking in. And so we're not able to do our high level executive functioning as well as we normally would, because it's coming up short compared to the overdrive of the limbic system. And so we end up with the inability to make decisions. We get confused. We let our emotions take the wheel. We're not able to override that because our prefrontal cortex is basically shut down a bit and it just can't do its job as it needs to. So when you put all this together, you can see where the stressors of the environment when we're growing up really just set us up to be in this automatic pilot of a stress response. And that just over time burns us out. And that prefrontal cortex can't take over with its executive function and lead us to good decision making, lead us to decisions that are well thought out, lead us to decisions that aren't overridden with emotion, but are a combination of our emotional response as well as our mental capacities working together to create a good outcome. So that is brain dysregulation. Sounds a little messy, but the good news, again, in all of this is that our brains are plastic and malleable. Now that we know that the way we respond to the world, the way we live in the world, the way we react to the environment or the stressors, the triggers of our environment can be modified and changed. It's not that we're broken, and that's the great news. We're just dysregulated. And I don't mean just lightly, but what I mean by using the word just is that we can take this and change it. And so now, again, that we know what's going on, we can, through following some healing processes, alter, re-regulate our dysregulated brain so that we can show up in the world from our heart space, being the best version of who we came here to be. So I'm going to leave you on this note. I hope it was super helpful for you. I just think it's, again, knowing that dysregulation is the hallmark of what makes complex PTSD different from other traumas, and we can change it, that's exciting news. We can be empowered to manage our lives in such a much more positive way, change the trajectory, rewrite our story, and come up with this new narrative of success and love of ourselves and others. Have a great day.